I'm here with Colin Killick.
Hello?
So, why don't we start with what you're doing currently? What do you do currently?
Sure. So currently I'm a master's student at the Harvard Kennedy School of Public Policy. Before that, for the last 2 years, I was a community organizer, an activist with an organization called the Disability Policy Consortium, fighting for the rights of disabled people in Massachusetts. And in my spare time for the last 4 years, I've been a slam poet. I'm a regular at the Cantab Lounge in Cambridge, Mass, and I was a member of the Worcester Seven Hills team at the 2015 National Poetry Slam in Oakland.
Wow. So, how did you get your start in, well, poetry?
So it's funny. I mean, I've always written a little bit. When I was in high school, just wrote, for fun. When I was in college, there was a poetry group at Williams called Speak Free that I was part of. The first, it existed for a year before I got there, but part of the first generation that turned it into a performance group. But it was only something I did occasionally. And then after college, moved to the Boston area, didn't know anybody, was looking for something to do. And I was walking by this bar and it said, Sunday nights open poetry slam. And I figured I would go and I would check it out. And I went and I read on the open mic once or twice, and I figured I would do a poetry slam. And I went up, I did my first piece, completely shaking, and I got off stage, and I got a decent score. And Bobby Crawford, who I now know is a big deal, at the time I had no idea, but gave me a hug and said, "That was great, please come back." And I've been doing it ever since.
Oh, I love Bobby Crawford.
He's pretty amazing.
He's amazing, yeah. But that's an awesome story.
Yeah, thank you.
So, why do you write?
I think that poetry, it's kind of, there was a way that you can be honest in poetry that I find it almost impossible to be in any other respect. There isn't a kind of level of emotional self-censorship that you have to have in other media. It lets you convey not just the factual contours of something, but the emotional contours of it. It lets you try and put someone else in the place that you are and help them understand your circumstances. And so, I've spent the last few years doing a lot of, political advocacy and political writing and that kind of thing, and having to make very nuanced, very professional arguments. And the wonderful thing about poetry is you can be true to yourself, and it's a chance, to have an audience of people who are really listening to you, and really convey the things that are most important to you, to them in a way that will really, really hit them. So.
It's your voice is finally getting heard.
Exactly, and it's like a lot of the time when I'm really busy, I'll think, I don't have time to go to an open mic or what have you. But every time I do go, I leave feeling refreshed. I leave feeling energized because it's a chance to let out that part of my brain that doesn't get much exercise in any other circumstances.
Yeah. Actually, most of your poems are pretty political. Why did you choose poetry as your platform for political expression?
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, most of my life is political to some extent. I'm studying politics. I've worked in politics, but I think that poetry has this ability to expose things to really shift people's perspectives, to bring them around in a way that mere factual argument can. Which is funny when in organizing work, right? I had this notion for a long time that, if you marshal the best statistics and the best facts and the best arguments, that'll convince politicians to do the right thing. And what I found is those are important, but the thing that's going to have the most impact is always a personal story. Mm-hmm. People react, people relate on an emotional level more than they do on a purely factual one. But my political poetry, for the most part, there are some exceptions to this, but I try not to do as much rip from the headline stuff. Not that there's anything wrong with that, but I think there are a lot of people writing that. When I'm writing political work, I try to pick up on things that are perhaps more broader, or they're speaking to things that I think aren't being talked about, or to sort of underlying themes of issues that aren't coming up in the news. just and try and create some things with some staying power, I guess. The danger of writing pieces that are just about this political thing that's happening right now is when that thing is past, the poem kind of has a shelf life. And it's, I remember someone talking between Bob Dylan and Phil Oakes, who are both great songwriters, but Phil Oakes would write Here's to the State of Richard Nixon, which is a brilliant song, but it really had its power when Richard Nixon was president. And Bob Dylan would write Masters of War, which will be relevant so long as there is a military-industrial complex, which unfortunately will probably be for a long time.
I don't see that going away at all, actually, or at least in the near future at all.
Right.
Or in any future.
Yes. It's something we ought to be working on getting rid of, but I think that's going to be a long struggle.
Oh, yeah. So which of your, the pieces you've written are actually your favorite?
Oh man, that's tough. They're the ones definitely, because like everybody has got, like, who does slam has like the pieces that other people know them for, and the pieces that they really, really enjoy doing. Because like the one that people like have heard of mine is a piece called Other Things Lincoln Would Not Have Done, which I wound up doing a lot, which is a very political piece. Probably the one that like I'm proudest of is actually not one of those that's not political at all. It's a piece called The Cutting Room, and it's kind of television as a metaphor for loss, and talking about like the network canceling a TV show as kind of a metaphor for like the end of a relationship, or the end of your connection to someone because they're no longer alive. And that's one that, like, I think in terms of writing at least is maybe the best work I've done. The other one would be in terms of pieces that like mean the most to me. I have one called 3 Generations, which is kind of a history of the American disability rights movement, which I got to do at Nationals in 2015. And there, it was just because growing up disabled, I didn't learn any of that history, right? I didn't learn that there was a history, that there was a culture and a movement, and that what rights I had because people had fought for me. I didn't learn any of that until I got into disability rights work professionally. And just thinking about how much it would have meant for me as a kid to know that I was part of a community, that there wasn't just something wrong with me. So I wrote that piece with the idea of giving a way for other people to have that history, to be introduced to that history. And in 3 minutes, obviously you can't get to everything, but this sort of this snapshot of this is the historical context in which we are, and this is where we're trying to go.
Wow. Let's see. I'm gonna skip. So, what are your inspirations for writing?
That's a good question. They come from a lot of different places. I mean, first and foremost, the best way to become a better writer of poetry is to hear more poetry.
Yeah.
The incredible thing about slam is that like there aren't really levels to it. Like even if you're a huge name, you're still going to open mics. You're still doing open slams. So like getting to be in the same competitions as people like Bobby, people like Janae Johnson and Portia Olaiwala and Megan Ford. And like hearing those pieces, Zeke Russell, and some poets, Portia is a good example of this. You look at them and you go, I could never do that in a million years, but it'll inspire some ideas. And then some people like Zeke, like Rick McIntyre, who's been a major influence on my work. You look at that and you go, they are writing about things I care about, and they're way above me, but if I think about it hard and I work really hard, that is something I can do. That is a place I can see my style going. And so having a goal to shoot for. And I've written a lot of pieces that were inspired by other people's pieces. I have a piece about a famous songwriter that's inspired by one of Bobby's pieces about another songwriter, but my one is specifically about kind of a disability context. So first and foremost, that reading pieces as well. Donald Hall was a big influence on my writing. Mark O'Brien, T.S. Eliot. This is the way the world ends, not with a bang, but with a whimper. It's still, I think, the most incredible line of poetry ever produced.
Going on with that. So going on with that, if you could have lunch with any two poets in the world, who would you choose and why?
Oh, that's a good question. Anybody, living or dead, or
Living, dead, fictional, if you want to go to that universe.
Dylan Thomas would definitely be one of them. Because he just seemed, I mean, both an incredible writer, his way with language is spectacular, but also just a fascinating person. Obviously a tragic life, but just had this incredible perspective. I actually found out, I went to a museum in Wales, where my uncle lives, a couple of years ago, and I saw that a guy, no one we knew of, but someone with my same last name actually tried to kill Dylan Thomas at one point, and thankfully did not succeed. Well, let's see, he would definitely be one of them. I would also be tempted to do that, him and a contemporary, somebody I actually know. I know him and Rick McIntyre, or Ed Wilkinson, or somebody like that, just to see the language play off each other, and to see the jokes go around the table, and the melding of perspectives. I'd be really interested to see how somebody like Dylan Thomas, who died before slam poetry was ever a thing, but who believed very much in recitation and performance, would react to the contemporary slam scene.
That makes sense. And last but you know what? Whatever. Last but certainly not least, a lot of poets, just because poetry comes to my mind is when she actually coaches a team for youth poetry. So I want to know, what are your thoughts on the youth involvement in poetry and speaking on political issues, social justice issues, that sort of branch of poetry?
I think it's fantastic, and it's something I really wish that I had exposure to when I was younger. I think I recall competing in one youth slam when I was growing up in Tucson, but there were 4 poets in it, and it was a one-off thing. Going to Louder Than a Bomb shows here, seeing youth poetry competitions, it excites me for the future of the medium. I think it means that slam is not going away anytime soon. And I'm thinking about, amazingly sophisticated pieces being done, by high school students. I'm thinking, God, if you can write that way at 16, I really want to see what you're going to be writing at 30. If you stick with that and you keep developing your voice and your ideas. I think the next generation of poets coming along is even going to surpass this one.
No doubt, there's a lot of talent in this world, or just even in this, in the greater Boston area.
Yeah. Oh God, this is such a good poetry city. It's amazing, just the level of entertainment. There's no other art form where you can go, any random Wednesday, you can go to the Cantab Lounge and pay $3 and see some of the best poetry in the world. I think there's no other art form where you can say that. That's what I think is so special about slam.
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.